We're back to issuing caveats when it comes to a Michigan win, but man, this game against Central Michigan showed you a lot that gives you some hope. Let's get into it on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of our everydayers for checking us out every single day, and thank you for making us your first listen. We do appreciate that as well. We're going to get into all things Michigan versus Central Michigan in segments 1 and segments 2. We're going to start off offensively and then move defensively, and then we're going to get into the sustainability of it. That's the plan for today. Obviously, this game was all about Bryce Underwood, who really showed up in ways that everyone had kind of hoped he could and would. And again, like I said at the very top, the Central Michigan caveat is a real thing, right? Like they've gone 1-2 now on the season. This, I think, I thought New Mexico going into the season was going to be the easiest game of the year. I think Central Michigan ended up being that. New Mexico, I think, is a little bit better than people thought. Obviously, they just basically got Deshaun Foster fired from UCLA after going and just trouncing the Bruins in the Rose Bowl. But they are a well-coached team. I don't know if we can say the same thing about Central. They do have a win, but it wasn't exactly like they went out and beat anybody of note. But at the same time, I mean, this was, as far as total yards gained, I guess we're just probably going to go all over the map a little bit when it comes to what we talk about. But yards gained by the Chippewas, this was their lowest output since 2019 against Wisconsin, a ranked Wisconsin team that year. You know, remember that was a Wisconsin team that absolutely annihilated Michigan that year. But there's that. But then Bryce just did everything that we hoped that we would see. Now, I tweeted this, and I'm going to reiterate it here. Based off of a conversation that I had with, I had multiple conversations, but based off of one particular conversation that I had with a notable person that I would say 99% of you know, this was Sherrone Moore's plan. Biff Poggi reiterated that in the post-game press conference. He reiterated that today. I should note that I wasn't on the ground today. I did not go to Ann Arbor, but I was on the ground for the game. And this was Sherrone Moore's plan from someone that I would trust to tell me exactly what was going on there. Now, the great thing is this is exactly what we said all week needed to happen, and we were a little bit curious if Sherrone Moore would have that plan. But executed amazingly. It's the first 60-point win by Michigan since 2021, facing off against Northern Illinois, almost 400 yards rushing. And I think what makes it interesting is it looked different than what we are accustomed to seeing from a 60-point-ish, or not point-ish. It was a 60-point win. Right? Usually when you see a game like that and you see a win like that, and it's Michigan, you probably think like, man, they just broke out all kinds of big, long runs all over the place, right? That was the case against Northern Illinois, and just a little bit of passing to go along with it. And that it was kind of more of methodical running. And that happened in large part due to Bryce Underwood's legs, because we didn't really get to see it work, the run game work, until Bryce started doing his thing. And for him to have the 235 yards passing, 114 yards rushing, incredible performance. I don't care if it's against Central Michigan, because you look at the throws he made, they were elite, right? We're back to seeing what we saw in week 1. He had the time, and now that's going to be the big thing. Is he going to have the time against some of these better teams? Now, I think Oklahoma very well might be. We don't know yet. It's too early. Might be the best defensive front that Michigan faces all year. And Michigan had a bad game plan to go along with it. I'm not going to I will say this for my conversation. They disagreed with my assessment that Michigan had a bad game plan against Oklahoma. I disagree vehemently. But I think that, it's doing what they were doing, the fact that he's able to layer the football in different ways. He had so many incredible throws, whether it was the back shoulder throw to Marlon Klein, the touchdown to Samaj Morgan. Yet again, you had instances where his stat line should have been better, but there were a couple drops, almost like receivers aren't used to getting the ball on time right in their hands. But all in all, I think, especially because you did see him go to the wide receivers in the passing game more than the tight ends, I think that's a bonus. I think the fact that the run game, it felt like they could not really get much going in the run game until he started keeping the ball. And he only carried the ball 9 times. That's the thing that makes it amazing. But it just opened up everything, and you saw everyone get into it. Obviously, you want to see some of the self-imposed penalties kind of, go by the wayside, right? Because having Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes both having long touchdowns called back, that's really deflating. And it's fine if it's in a big rout against Central Michigan, and probably not fine if you're playing on the road at Nebraska or at USC or whatever, right? So you've got to make sure that you've got those things buttoned up. But generally, I thought the offense was a heck of a lot better. Still have a lot of the same concerns that I had before, but a lot of those are negated just by letting Bryce run loose. And that's the kind of like what Biff Poggi says, right? He says he's Batman. He says, like, we took the air out of the ball for the Oklahoma game and we put it back in for this one, and we're never taking the air out again. I mean, yeah, you question why did they make the decisions they made before? Yeah, not great. But at the same time, like, man, you at least you figured it out now, and we'll see where it goes. Because here's the thing. If they go out and play with that level of dynamism at quarterback, and the offense is able to just move and push things downfield and just has all these different options, because that's the thing that really made it really impressive, was that the offense could do just about anything once it started getting going. Again, Central Michigan caveat. But we've seen teams that we thought were better Michigan teams do play against teams that were essentially equal to what Central Michigan was and languish. So now kind of comes a question, because here's the thing that happens in college football that people don't understand year to year. Are the teams Michigan faced really good? Now, New Mexico, don't expect them to be making their way into the college football playoff or anything like that, but are they better than expected? Right? They took out a Big Ten team, and it really wasn't particularly close. They looked well coached against Michigan. 34-17 game in Ann Arbor. Certainly could have gone a much different way for Michigan, right? Michigan was in control of that game. But are they better than expected? Is Oklahoma, have they risen from being like what we thought, kind of, as Steve, my good friend Steve Dace put it, the 5th best SEC team? Are they maybe one of the top 2 or 3? Maybe. They look a heck of a lot better through 3 weeks than Texas. They look about the same as Tennessee and Georgia, having watched a bit of that game, right? Like Alabama, they look better than Alabama generally. So they very well might be one of the better teams in the SEC. Maybe. We'll find out, right? Like, that's the thing. You see that happening with some other fan bases, as Michigan State laments that Boston College, who they thought was maybe pretty good, ends up losing to a really bad Stanford team that lost to Hawaii. So this is where we start to recalibrate, and we'll find out a lot more with what Michigan's able to do when it goes to Nebraska this week. But man, just by letting Bryce be Bryce, it plays right into everything that we talked about that Michigan needs to do. And like what Connor said on Thursday, you got to let the Ferrari, drive the Ferrari like it's a Ferrari. I still say it's a Bugatti Chiron. That's what I say. But I mean, good on Michigan for recognizing, hey, this is what needs to happen, and then going ahead and doing that. All right, we've got so much more coming up. We've got to get into the defense and then where things go from here. That is at least the plan. As we tend to do on this show, we might deviate from the plan depending on how we feel. But we will get to more here in just a moment. But before we do, quick question for all of you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. It's the same vintage styles fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They still go for the same price they did back then. When you use the code Locked On, you get your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle hat. You've seen me wearing the retro circle hat here on this show. And you can use the code Locked On for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment, but let me tell you what, man. I've had a hard time staying awake ever since the beginning of the season. It's just been, whether it's the beta blockers I took on the flights down to and from Oklahoma or just lack of sleep. Sometimes you just need something to keep you up. And guess what? Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot pack the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere to get that boost when you need it. I always reach for some kind of citrus flavor. That's the thing. That I love anything citrus. That keeps me going because it's refreshing. It gives me that quick lift before a busy day. Has that real refreshment thing going for it. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. All right, really good to see the offense clicking. How about the defense, man? Jaishawn Barham shot out of a cannon. I honestly kind of surprised he only ended up having 2 sacks on the day because he just looked absolutely unstoppable. Kind of weird without TJ Guy in there. Biff Poggi confirms today that was just a game plan scenario, which you'd think you'd still work him in. Said it was because they're a heavy run team, but you'd think like you'd still work in your team captain. Kudos on TJ for taking that like a champ. At least that's what it sounds like happened. But yeah, man, I think that is... I think you saw a lot of really good up front. Again, a lot of holding in this game, but, you know, this time you saw guys bursting through, held them to, I can't remember the exact number, but like I said, it's the lowest output that Central Michigan has had since 2019. That's 6 years. So while Michigan's defense might not quite be exactly where we hope, I mean, they're climbing, right? Like sometimes it's good to have that week 2 game like they did. You know, sometimes it's good to have those things. And one of the things that I was talking to Steve about on Saturday night is, can Michigan find a couple players that end up being those standouts, like in 2021? Keeping in mind that it was not this time of the year that we were talking about David Ojabo in any way, shape, or form. That wasn't happening at all, right? It wasn't until week 5 against Wisconsin that suddenly it was like, oh, David Ojabo is someone that is burst onto the scene. So we don't necessarily know who those guys are yet. Now, Aiden Hutchinson that year, you know, was shot out of a cannon. We knew who he was right away. We knew that he was going to have a big year. He had exactly that. It might take a little bit of time, right? Like you look at the sack leaders and the interception leaders. Right now, the sack leaders are Jaishawn Barham and Cole Sullivan with 2 apiece. I think it's pretty interesting that Cole Sullivan's up there. Jaishawn, I don't think is a surprise. Interception leaders is just a bunch of guys with 1. So that in and of itself is interesting, right? Just to see that it's Elijah Dotson, Cole Sullivan, TJ Kai, TJ Metcalf, right? Just to have like just a list of a bunch of guys that have 1. It's great to have this scenario where everyone's getting into the mix, because that makes it where like there isn't necessarily one who's feared, right? You have to fear the whole thing. But like I mentioned, Elijah Dotson, you know, Jaden Sanders got the start with Zeke Berry out this week. Kind of feels like Zeke probably could have gone this week, but they didn't. Again, the competition being what it was. But can someone rise up the ranks, right? Can it be an Elijah Dotson? We've been waiting on Shamari Earls. He finally got to play kind of last rotation, but getting involved, like, you know, Will Johnson came on in his freshman year, but it wasn't until relatively late in the year that he did. But then he was locked down. So can somebody step up and be that guy? My money would be on it being Jaishawn, because we are already kind of seeing it in the versatility, right? You can move him around. Just because he played mostly at edge this week doesn't mean he isn't going to stay mostly at linebacker a lot of the times. That's game plan specific, but I think having that ability to use chess pieces like that really bodes well for the Michigan defense. And I'm curious to see who ends up being those guys. But just, again, the fact that I think that I saw something that said Michigan had 100% pressure rate when not blitzing. I don't care who you're playing. That's a great thing to see. To be able to do that. To be able to not send an extra guy, and yet you still have like the quarterback is under pressure the entire time. That is absolutely incredible and speaks to what they have. Now you just have to get consistent because, okay, it's Central Michigan. We're going to continue to give those caveats because we want to see it against a Nebraska, right? Like you want it to go from kind of like 2022 in 2023, but really I'm thinking of 2022 where it was like, okay, Michigan, you played, I don't remember who was even week 1 that year. But I remember it was Hawaii, and then I don't remember who was week 3. Week 3 was UConn, which, you know, like you I don't remember who week 1 was though. But you have those scenarios where it's like, okay, like okay, you're doing it against these teams, but can you do it against Penn State? And then they do. That's going to be a big thing. Especially, I mean, it's really both sides of the ball, but really, like that's what you want to see is this. Okay, you can carry it over to the tougher competition, and I think that they've got a lot of things working in their favor defensively. I am still like I'm feeling really good about the front 7. I'm feeling really good about the safeties. It's still just that cornerback position, and that's where I love seeing an Elijah Dotson step up. That's where it's great to get Jaden Sanders some early playing time, like he is. And then you hope Shamari Earls can come along. Now, you don't want true freshmen on Jeremiah Smith in the final week. But guess what? If you can get the type of pressure they got, then you're really off to the races. It doesn't matter who you're playing. Now, get the quarterback off his spot and make him uncomfortable. And yeah, a receiver might still be able to go up and make that play. But just put them in a situation where it has to be the quarterback and the receiver both have to make a play rather than the quarterback sitting there all day and the receiver's wide open, right? Like just making things more difficult in terms of that. That's where having the rush that they had, being able to move guys around, right? Because then you can start doing some different things with Jaishawn in particular that will become interesting. And you still got, you know, you can still have Jimmy Rolder in there to replace him at that linebacker position. I think one of the interesting things we're seeing this year so far is that it isn't really like, unlike the Mike McDonald and the Jesse Minter experiences, and even last year's Wink Martindale, where you were still kind of expecting to see essentially a 4-2-5, you're seeing a lot of different looks here. You're seeing packages with 3 defensive tackles and 2 edge rushers. You're seeing just all kinds of different formations, whether it is a 4-2-5, a 4-3-4, a 5-3, what 5-3-3. I mean, they've just got all kinds of different things that we've seen. And I think that's going to make life really difficult on some of the other offenses. And this week we'll find out. So where does Michigan go from here? That's usually where we go in segment 3 for the Monday show. So we're going to go right to that. That's going to be the plan here. We're just going to stay with the plan. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking projections like Josh Allen for more or less than 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley. I was going to say Saquon Barley. I don't know why. Saquon Barkley for more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. The best part, even if your picks miss, Prize Picks invented the flex play so you can still double your money. So download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code Locked On College. You get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On College for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, we're going to continue on here momentarily, but before we do, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I'm telling you, that's incredible. I think what I used was like $150. So you got to take advantage of that. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, that's what I do. I get really greedy with it, too. Or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, this is going to be interesting going to Norman. No, sorry, not Norman, Lincoln. Lincoln, Norman. I don't know. They're just both first name cities. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Michigan's able to do. Dylan Raiola might be a little bit. Here's the thing. You face John Mateer, who, in part due to his game against Michigan, is currently leading most people's Heisman. Okay, so there's that. Dylan Raiola looks improved. I don't know how much. And he doesn't have the same mobility that John Mateer did. But he can kill you from the pocket, so it's going to be incumbent on Michigan. This offensive line might be about the same as what they faced in Norman. So you hope that they can get some holding calls if that happens. Defensively, I don't think that Nebraska's where Oklahoma was. So that should bode well. This could be like kind of what we talked about after week 1, where it was you have the pieces to be able to get into a track meet if necessary. Like I said earlier in the show, though, all of the problems that I believe existed before still exist. It's just equalized somewhat by one guy who, if Michigan lets him go and lets him do his thing, which is what they did last week, then you're in a situation where anything can happen any given Saturday. Bryce can make any play on the field. We've already seen that. Now, the question is, when competition steps up, can he still do it? The big question that we had all offseason, can Michigan be that road team? I don't know. It's a big question. But just by virtue of what he was able to do by keeping defenses honest in the idea of like, and this is what they should have done against Oklahoma, right? Because it's like having more designed runs and giving him the green light to go when he sees green ahead of him. That just changes the calculus of what defenses want to do. Like, it's kind of what we talked about in the offseason about what J.J. McCarthy did against Hawaii. That's what I loved about this CMU game was, number one, first play of the game, didn't connect, deep bomb downfield. Yeah, you connect on that, it completely changes things. But I mean, you're getting closer, right? He's had some deep bombs that have connected, maybe not as deep as what they tried there. But you show off he's got the arm. Now you show off he's got the legs. That opens up things for your running game. Teams have to start being a little bit more honest. They can't completely pack the box if he's got the arm. But they also can't necessarily backload everything either because he's got the legs. This is why I wish they would have maybe gotten to some of these things earlier. Now, Biff Poggi said today, like, the changes essentially, it's not that everything's changed. It's just like you assess what you have with your team and say, this is what we're best at. I mean, the problem is that's exactly what we think that we all thought should happen in week 1. I can understand if it's an idea of like, we're not going to show it before we play Oklahoma, but then to go and do all of like everything Connor said on Thursday, the condensed formations, the pistol, turning your back to the defense, not giving enough time to come out of the huddle and assess what you're looking at. Like, a lot of those problems were fixed, but I still don't know what the caliber of wide receiver. I like that it wasn't tight end heavy, and that does make me think like, okay, if you can win games, I know it's Central Michigan, we have to keep saying that. If you can win games passing to your wide receivers and only like, well, there was only one, I don't know. Like, I think, did Marlon have a catch? I know I remember thinking of some of the blocks. Hogan Hansen had the one catch, but you're essentially going more to your receivers. That's good. You needed to be able to do that in certain games. But then like that just opens up everything, because then if your tight ends are healthy, right? We haven't seen full strength tight end group yet with both Hogan and Marlon healthy. So if you have them healthy in games like this, and you're able to go to your receivers, and Bryce can carry the football, and the running backs can do all, like it could, will it be unstoppable? No. Could it? If everything goes like, if Michigan is smart, the play calling is smart as it was this week, and you let Bryce be Bryce, I mean, it could change everything. for the season. The defense, I am not worried about the defense. Even against like a really good Oklahoma team, they held them to 24 points. It took them all game to get to 24. All game. If John Mateer ends up being that Heisman guy, then man, that looks pretty good. That's where it's like, the preseason expectations versus reality is not always, a thing. Michigan having what I can still consider to be a dumb game plan offensively, going into Norman, certainly hampered their ability to do things that you might think that they might be able to do this week or in a couple weeks against USC or down the line playing Ohio State. So I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. Again, this is what I was told. It was the plan going in. That was Sherrone Moore led plan. So for those who are like, yeah, this is great this week and last week, but Sherrone Moore's going to go back. Listen, let's use the hypothetical. It wasn't even it wasn't hypothetical. It was kind of like what we were saying last week. Let's say it wasn't hypothetically Sherrone Moore's plan to do what happened last week. And Biff Poggi and Chip Lindsey go into this next week and they do the same thing and it works. Sherrone Moore isn't going to be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? You just can't. Like that's like a quick way to get fired. Well, especially when it's like Biff Poggi's doing it. That's a quick way to be like, we're going to go with the guy that knows how to use the guy. Because here's the thing. At this stage, no matter what, like Bryce Underwood is more important than Sherrone Moore at the moment for Michigan football. He is. You use him correctly, everything, because it's not just current, it's future. And even though Sherrone Moore is a great recruiter, like if you put Bryce Underwood in a box and keep him in a box and keep him bottled up and don't run him and don't let him throw downfield and put him in situations like having this condensed formation where he's coming to the line with 7 seconds left, then no quarterback is going to want to come play for you. No wide receiver is going to want to come play for you. So this all has to kind of work out. So do I think that Sherrone Moore would sit there and look at it and say like, nah. We gotta put the toothpaste back in the tube. We gotta condense things. We gotta smash. Who cares about Bryce Underwood and what he can do? Like, you would be setting your offense back for a generation if you continue to do that. And I don't think again, we're using a hypothetical here. I don't believe that that's what Sherrone Moore's doing based off of conversations I've had. I also don't think I think he's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. Do I think what happened against Oklahoma was idiotic? Yes. But do I think he and everyone else learned from it? Also, yes. So we'll see what happens in Norman. All right, tomorrow is going to be the mailbag. Then we're going to do Jack Tuttle on Wednesday, Connor Stallions on Thursday. Friday will be interesting to see how I want to do that, because we'll be driving to Nebraska that day. So we'll see. That one's going to be kind of up in the air as how we handle that show. Anyway, that's going to do it for us today, though. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.